This is the Brand Gravity Show, where we explore the intersection between building a brand and psychology. My name is Kay Putnam, psychology-driven brand strategist. I am your host, and I am really excited to bring you today's conversation. So in my Clarity Code brand building framework, C stands for character. So we figure out who we are, then we determine what our offer is, which is O. Next step in the framework is to build demand for our brand. Final step is energy, which we've covered in a few of the other episodes. But today's conversation is mostly centered around this idea of building demand for our brand. And Lanie has an incredible perspective and fresh information to share around the use of data and analytics. Bear with me, the conversation is much more interesting than what that sounds like. I learned so much and am going to be changing things in my business based on what we talked about. Lanie Lamarre is the host of the OMGrowth podcast, where she helps solopreneurs better know and understand their numbers without having to become an analyst to do it. Let's get into the interview. Before we get too far into it, can you give us a quick synopsis of your story so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where when you've been on the online world for a while, it just feels like, again, a gazillion years ago where it all started. I was working in systems and helping people set things up, doing workflows and onboarding sequences and things like that. And to a certain degree, I guess I'm still in that. I just kind of gravitated more towards let's organize this, let's track this, let's know what the end result of these things are. So I got more into the tracking and analytics side of it. And I have a background in privacy, so in data privacy. And so that's come in very handy in the last few years with all the changes happening online with people crying. I call it the Chicken Little, where it's just everyone, the sky is falling. iOS changed everything. We have no more businesses anymore. And it's like, no, you had a business before, you will have a business after, you just have to adapt. And it's about adapting to how marketing is changing and how data is being treated and how people are becoming a little bit more cognizant of how their information is being used out there. Because it's not just your aunt who's freaking out at the holiday dinner being like, they're following me all over the internet. I saw those shoes on all the ads. They know everything. They listen to my conversations. Okay, it's a little much, but is it really wrong? Not completely. So yeah, that's something that I've really kind of gotten into in helping business owners, small business owners especially solopreneurs, people who are not running a huge shop, but who have either a team of one or a team of up to maybe 5 or something like that, where what data are you collecting? What do you need to collect? What do you need to know in order to actually make those sorts of gains that you're looking for? Because hashtag all the things don't actually matter, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. We are going to have such a good conversation. I think that I'm looking forward to this conversation in particular because the data and the analytics and privacy is not what you would think of top of mind when you're thinking about psychology-driven branding. But at the basis of a really good brand is an element of trust. And trust requires transparency and figuring this all out. So I'm excited for your wise counsel and to dig into all of the things. Okay, where to start?
Well, transparency is a good place to start.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, it's hard for small business owners to be transparent about the data they're collecting because most of the time they don't know what data they're collecting. They're not even really aware of the extent to which they're collecting information. They just installed the pixels because someone told them they should. Yeah. I've been that person in the past, by the way. I've told people, install the Google Analytics pixel. Go ahead. Facebook pixel, it's better to have all the back information because data is not retroactive. You want to have that data collected. But what you don't realize is what's happening with these companies, how much of the data they're collecting. And you're actually, for Google, for instance, you are legally responsible for the sort of integrity of the information you're collecting. They have put it in the terms and conditions that you are agreeing to not collect personally identifiable information. However, most people don't even know what that is. So
Right.
you would really have to hire somebody to install and set up Google Analytics for you in order for it to be set up in a way that is legally compliant. You also don't own that information. Google owns that information. You're just collecting it on their behalf. You're like an information broker. You're like, yeah, sure, I'll tell you everything about anyone who's ever come to my site, where they were before, because it doesn't necessarily stop and end there. There's a lot of information that you are giving them that they are using to, do all the other to build a $180 billion business or whatever it is. So the problem is that there's like, I think, over 500 data sets. And I mean, I'm an analytics person and I don't think I could name more than 100. So there's a lot of information being collected that you are being accountable for, but that you don't necessarily know. So it's hard for people to be transparent.
Yeah. So now that we are properly petrified, I had a question formulated and my mind is going in a bunch of different directions, but what is the consequence of having, say, the Facebook pixel and the Google pixel on our website? What does that mean?
It means that you are collecting information on behalf of those companies. You have the ability to collect information for free because they are monetizing that information. That's why they're sort of, the big companies making all the money. There are privacy compliant analytics software that you can install on your site, but you will have to pay for them. So things like, I like Plausible. There's also Fathom that I've used where, they're GDPR compliant. All of these rules in terms of privacy, people think that, oh, I'm in the US, GDPR doesn't impact me because my business is in the US. However, if you're selling to people or if you have people from the UK or the EU who are coming to your website, they're the ones who are being protected by their rights. And so if you have people from California coming to your site, they have CCPA. There's just so many different privacy policies that you have to sort of keep on top of if you're going to be collecting information on behalf of those companies, that you would need to hire somebody who makes sure that you're being compliant, unless you're going to be a professional in it. Or you can pay for analytics software that is designed to be privacy compliant. And you can even, like in my terms and conditions in my privacy policy, there's a link to the demo sites of these, of Plausible and Fathom, because then you can see exactly what data I'm collecting. And you can see the extent of the data that I'm collecting when you're visiting my website. So that's an element of transparency in terms of showing people what you're collecting about them.
So if I understand correctly, these two systems or softwares, Plausible and Fathom, they are another layer that you add on top of your website that affects what data that Google and Facebook are collecting from your users. Is that correct?
No, you get rid of Google Analytics.
Gotcha.
It replaces Google Analytics. So you would be paying, I think it's $9 a month for Plausible. Now, it's not as robust as Google Analytics. I mean, when I first got into it, I'm like, well, where's the rest of it? Because there's got to be more information. But then when you start actually using that information that's being collected, you're like, oh, well, this is kind of everything I need to actually make data-driven decisions, which is the point of having analytics on your site, right? It's to be able to take action on these sorts of things.
Yeah, there's a whole nother conversation that I want to get into over there. But before we do that, so just to hit this home, the risk that small business owners are participating in or taking on if they are choosing to use Google Analytics is that they are liable and probably doing it wrong in terms of the data that they're collecting. Is that right?
If they've just installed it themselves and they aren't well versed in privacy policies and how the setup of Google Analytics is, then probably yes. I'm not saying Google Analytics is bad in any way. I'm just saying that there are consequences to it, and you do need to have somebody who's looking out for you and who's an expert in that field who will install it and make sure that you're being privacy compliant and will maintain that for you. Like, it's a maintenance thing. So it's not a one and done out of the box, just install it and you're done sort of situation.
It's so interesting because on the other side of things, on the marketing side of things, one of the ways that we grow our brand is by continuing to build a relationship. So those remarketing tools have value on the marketing side of things, but we have to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is compliant and legal in all of the places where all of our potential users can be coming from.
Yes. And I think
Yes.
people are seeing, we're seeing a lot of changes. Like I said, the iOS update, everyone's freaking out about, well, this is changing how I'm having to market. Well, maybe we needed to change how we had to market because maybe some of it was a little too invasive. And you will maybe hear people talk about the cookie apocalypse, which is where cookies, which are the things that track wherever you go sort of thing. You have third-party cookies. So the thing that your aunt is freaking out about at Thanksgiving dinner, they're listening to everything and the ads are showing up everywhere. Maybe that is kind of weird on a certain level. If you think about it in a real life situation, would you think it was weird if you went to the candle store in the mall and then you went to the sporting goods store and then the candle lady came up being like, you still want the candle? And you're like, no, lady, you can't really opt out of that either because she's going to follow you into the department store and you're just going to keep seeing the candle lady. Whereas if you were doing that in a more personal way, a more engaged way, as you were saying, let's say somebody visited your candle on your website and then you followed up in their email saying, hey, are you still interested in this? And they say no. That's some sort of engagement. And this is what people are starting to refer to as zero party data, where you're the one who's engaging with the people in your world. Your quiz, for instance, is a really great example of zero party data where you have people who take a quiz on your site. They give you information because they are taking your quiz. You are gathering information about them. They are aware of what information you are gathering about them, and you're using that information to send the marketing messages that are more targeted towards what their wants and needs are. And you can engage with them in a more personal way. And I think marketing is going to have to get a little bit more interactive, a little bit more engagement driven, and a little less creepy candle lady being like, hey, do you want my thing? Oh, I saw that you liked somebody else who liked somebody else, and maybe you would want to see my product too. Maybe you're going to have to be a little bit more intentional about how you're putting yourself out there.
Yes, I love that. It sounds less lazy to me. And it just forces marketers and business owners and brand builders to live in integrity with the values that many of us have, because we were benefiting from some pretty shady data practices from Facebook if we were using targeting like, oh, show my ad to people who are making $200,000 a year. Like, where that data came from may have not been the greatest source. Yeah. And even if we aren't the one that's gathering, and especially if we're not the one that's gathering that data directly, is that really ours to use? It's really an interesting conversation for sure. So you use my quiz as an example of a place where I don't have to rely on data from Google and Facebook. Do you have other examples? Like, what does that ecosystem look like if we're not using other people's data? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Well, it's going to require, like you say, that we can't be as lazy as we've been. We can't necessarily depend on the big entities like the Facebooks to be collecting all the data as to what people like and know and want, and then target them based on that. You're going to have to ask your people the sorts of questions that will get you to collect the sort of data so you can know a little bit more about them, so you can target your messages a little more directly towards what they want and need. So having a quiz on your website, sure, that's a great thing. Find what sorts of things that they click on in your emails. Is there sort of a theme or a trend in the types of things that they're interested in? Get them to self-identify certain things. Ask them questions in the email. You know, that ABC, hey, are you a solopreneur? Do you work with a team or do you have an agency? Or do you like blue, red, or purple better? You know, just get to know them, get to ask questions. You're going to have to engage. I know it's like one of these things where people are like the big marketers who've gotten away with being able to do the pay and spray approach to marketing. They're like, this is so unfair. It's ruining my business model. Okay. because you can't do the pay and spray, you're going to have to start engaging on an individual level. And that's why you're seeing a lot more companies coming up like the Bonjoros and things where you can chat with people in like where the chat messaging becomes something that's a more centralized part of your social media marketing. That engagement factor is something that you're going to see more apps and creativity developed around because we need that in order to market to people.
Yes, yes. And this just reinforces the necessity to build a brand because you are going to have to now earn that trust and earn that mind share in people's minds for them to want to give you any data, for them to want to answer your questions. And I feel like that's a healthier ecosystem than I don't want to pick on a certain industry, but like drop shipping e-commerce stores were really popular for a period of time. I don't think that business model is working as well anymore for that reason, because it required cheap targeted ads because they hadn't built the brand equity to actually support the sales that they were making. So it's a necessary change.
Absolutely a necessary. From like when you step away, get out of your marketing shoes.
Yeah.
Walk away from your brand for a second and think like a human being. And then act like a human being. Just act the way you want things. Act like the online world you want to see, Be that sort of change that you want to see in the way that you're marketed to online. What would you appreciate from Amazon, for instance? Or what would you appreciate on those ads that you see in Facebook? What would speak to you in a more direct way that it wouldn't be so the creepy I keep using the word creepy, but is there another word? Because some of it is really creepy.
Yes. Yes. Okay. I love this so much. And it's something that, truth be told, I've been a little bit complacent about for that reason that you said earlier. It's like, okay, well, I might as well just have the data. I might as well install the thing. So if I need to use it in the future, then I have it, kind of thing. But there is actual consequences to making that decision. Plus, you're playing into this system that a lot of us say that we don't want to be a part of. And yet we are kind of doing that passively if you aren't being proactive about how you as a business are collecting people's data. So yeah, I love this awareness.
And let's be transparent about this. When you're collecting all the data, do you look at any of the data? Like, do you even make a regular habit of looking at those numbers? You don't, because it's overwhelming, not because you don't want to be data driven, not because you don't realize the importance of these things. It's just too much. And it's collected in such a hodgepodge way because you're relying on all of these places to collect the data for you. So, Facebook is going to put its data into your Google Analytics with its naming conventions in its way. Then the stuff that you're doing from email, your email automatically tags your emails in a certain way. But when you override the way everyone else is collecting data for you in the way you're promoting yourself by using your own naming conventions, suddenly you have reports that are very, very clear and clean where you can just pop in 15 minutes and be like, oh, this is what's working. This is what isn't. This is maybe what I need to work on changing. You're able to take those quick, actionable decisions when you actually see reports that you can read and understand. And that isn't just like that overwhelming mess of mixed data that now you have to try to make sense of.
Yes, that's where I wanted to take our conversation next, because this has been my conundrum with data. I absolutely am not looking at it because there's a couple things that happen. I feel like when we're just getting started in business, we might have data because people tell us that that's what we should do. Guilty of telling people that.
Me too.
But it's hard to get to a level of statistical significance with data when you're just getting started. Because like if you have 10 people go to a page and say one of them takes an action, it doesn't tell you a whole lot. So how do you recommend that people start to look at using data effectively and in a sane way in their online business?
So using that example that you just used, I'm going to go back to not all data is numbers. You can have data that's information. So if you only had 10 people that visited that page and only one took the action you wanted, ask all those 10 people what made them take the action or not take the action that you wanted them to take. What was it that stuck for them, or what was it that was missing for them? When you only have 10 people and it's not statistically significant to look at the numbers and the trends that are building because of those numbers are telling you what the trend is, ask the people what the trend is. That's the sort of joy of when you have small numbers, is you can actually get insights from the people who are visiting your pages or who are engaging with your brand. And getting that qualitative data is eons more valuable than looking at numbers.
Yes, yes. Okay, I love that distinction because that has been what I've leaned on, even in my business. And I have a fair amount of traffic and subscribers and all of these things. But the conversations are so rich with insight that that's told me a lot of things, even to this day. Like when I'm on a sales call, if I'm on a coaching call, I can learn a lot more about even my audience as a whole versus looking at a bunch of that hodgepodge of data that we were talking about earlier in Google Analytics or wherever. What are the key metrics that you track or that you recommend the people that you're talking to that they track?
So it's going to depend on what you're looking at and what you're investing in. So if you're investing your time, money, and or energy into any specific area, you want to be looking at those specific metrics. So if I'm focusing on my social media, for instance, or if I've just built out the tracking on my email marketing and I have those funnels set up with my automations, and I would want to look at how are those automations performing. And to see how those automations are performing, I would want to see the click-throughs onto the page. I don't care about open rates. Those aren't necessarily reliable like they once were anyway. But you want to see which emails drove the traffic to your site and seeing the order in which, so maybe your second email drove the most traffic back to your site, got the most people clicking through. Well, what's so great about that second email? And maybe it was the fourth email that got the least amount of traffic. Well, what's happening in that email that people are not engaging with it? And really identifying the trends of how your people are engaging with the types of materials that you're putting out. Compare your own test paper to your own results, sort of thing, as opposed to looking at, oh, this is what's working for this person and I should put a funnel in like this. Cool, put the funnel in like that, the way, the guru tells you to put it, but then look at how your people are engaging with that funnel, because that's what's going to tell you what's working, so you can double down on that and do more of that. What isn't, so that you can stop doing that, and what is kind of working so that you can tweak and make the changes to improve that. It's by looking at your own numbers from the specific promotions that you're engaging with, but you really have to focus on one thing at a time. So to say, oh, well, I'm looking at my numbers. Okay, but in relation to what? You really want to focus on what you're working on currently, what you're investing on, what do you want to see a return on at this point? Because all the numbers, they don't matter all the time.
Oh, that's huge. Okay, to ask a more advanced question, you mentioned you're having your own naming conventions. Does this mean that you are adding your own UTM codes to links in different places when you're trying to figure out if a specific campaign is working, or what does that mean?
It's exactly that. You are using what's called UTM parameters. So that's a little piece of code that you add at the end of any link that you're sharing. So you would use a UTM parameter anywhere where you're sharing a link that is outside of your website. Okay. Anything that you are promoting, that you are trying to drive traffic to your website, you should have that link that drives traffic to your website and the UTM parameter identifying what was the campaign that I was promoting here. What part of all the work that I'm doing was this a reflection of? How did that person get to my website? So that you can track what your efforts are, what the return on your investments are, what the return on your promotions are. And you never put UTM parameters on your own website, even though you want to see, oh, well, how did that lead to this? No, they're already on your website. So you don't want to override the coding that got them there, because then you would know how somebody got to your website. But if you put another UTM parameter on your website, then it would be like, oh, I'm overriding it with this code. So it's kind of like, I like to use the sort of analogy of how I think it's goofy to Take Me Out to the Ball Game when you're at the ball game. You're already at the ball game. You don't need to sing Take Me Out to the Ball Game. And you don't need to put UTM parameters on your site because they're already on your website. So anything that you're sharing, a link that drives traffic to your website should have a UTM parameter, and you should have a strong naming convention that will make it really easy for you to read your reports in a way that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And again, this is a more advanced level of looking at this, but for all of the students and clients that I worked with, I have heard it so often that they're like, I am doing all of the things and I have no idea what is working.
Absolutely. It gives you control over your own storytelling. It allows you to see, oh, yes, this was the campaign that I drove, the campaign that I drove Instagram traffic from, and that same campaign where I got my Facebook traffic from, and that same campaign that I shared on a podcast. And so you're able to see, well, how do the promotions that I do on Facebook versus Instagram versus on my podcast perform compared to one another? So you can really compare how all of your efforts for the same campaign are across the board.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to get even geekier here for a second. So let's imagine.
I love it.
Yes, you're going to nerd out. So let's imagine that we have, 40 people coming from Facebook. We have 50 people coming from Instagram, and we had 30 people come from podcast features or interviews that you did. How are you, or how do you recommend that people assess that data? Like, are you comparing it to just like an intuitive sense of how much time each of those things took, or how are you taking that data and making it a decision?
I like that you use the word intuitive. It's not something that you think of a lot with data, but you're right. You look at your numbers and your performance, because here's the thing. Just because you made the sale through Facebook doesn't mean that they didn't come through to your site on Instagram and also through your podcast, and they saw it a couple times, but it was that time they came through Facebook that really made them make the sale. That doesn't make those other touch points less valuable. In fact, those touch points were necessary. But getting intuitive about how do you feel about your results? Are they disappointing in some way? What part of it is disappointing to you? Why? So if you're disappointed by your Instagram numbers, well, why do you feel disappointed? Well, I spent 5 hours on that dang reel and nobody came, like, this is all I got for it. Just the people coming. Okay, so maybe that is a measure of how you feel about the time you're spending on reels. It might not necessarily be a reflection of your sales, but how you're spending your time in your business. So, and when you have those clear reports, you kind of have the luxury of getting intuitive and a little woo-woo about your feelings, about the feelings that you're spending on for the time that you're spending on these apps, because we do spend a lot of time promoting ourselves and we have a right to feel some type of way. You might feel surprised by the amount of people coming through through an affiliate, for instance, which is a great way to feel surprised by, oh my gosh, there's so many more sales coming through this. Well, why am I surprised by this? What can I do to surprise myself a little more about this?
Yes. Yes. I think it's so interesting. I love when that happens, where you have the positive surprise, especially if you're not spending very much time or energy into whatever you're surprised about, because it shows you an opportunity. It shows you an opportunity to invest maybe just a little bit more energy and see what's possible in that realm if it's already working without even a whole lot of attention being paid in that area. Pinterest has always been that for me. It's like I see all of this traffic coming from Pinterest and I don't have to dedicate any energy to it. It just kind of happens. I'm like, I wonder what would happen if I did dedicate more energy to that.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's super fascinating. Okay. Let's rewind a little bit. So for people that are just getting started and they're freaking out because we're talking about UTM parameters and multi-channel marketing and all of these things. You told us that we should focus on whatever we're focused on. So like start looking at the data. Do you recommend setting up a experiment in the beginning in any certain way? Like how long are you looking at data before you're starting to make decisions based on it?
I think you should always make decisions based on it. Your example that you used earlier, the 10 people who came to your site, that's not a lot of data. It's not a lot of people. It's not statistically significant, but you can still make data-driven decisions with that by approaching these people and getting some zero party data from them and finding out, what they're interested in. Just because you have a little bit to work with doesn't mean that you can't take action on that right away. This is an ongoing thing. It's like your marketing, for instance. You're never done marketing. You might have completed a campaign and all the materials for it, but there's going to be another one around the corner. You're never done marketing yourself, and you're never done tracking the results of how you're spending that time. So if you have, a month-long launch, well, you're going to look at those numbers over probably a 6-week period at that point, because you probably have a pre-launch period. But it's really about choosing that lane of what am I going to focus on looking at? What am I going to focus on improving?
We're going to get right back to the interview. For the next few seconds, I'm going to share with you my Brand Clarity Collective and how it can help you grow your income and impact. If you're an entrepreneur who feels stuck or uncertain about what makes your brand stand out, then this is for you. The Brand Clarity Collective is a mastermind multiplied by mentorship. It's part online curriculum, part digital mastermind, and it's designed to help you get crystal clear brand clarity so you attract more perfect clients and grow your business. We have a thriving community of entrepreneurs who are all smart and driven. As a member of the collective, you get an all-access pass to all of my best branding courses, as well as access to our private community where you can connect with like-minded entrepreneurs and get feedback and support directly from me on our coaching calls. The Brand Clarity Collective is priced at just $297 per month, and after 6 months, you keep lifetime access to all of the courses. To learn more and to see if it's right for you, head over to my homepage at kputnam.com. There's a big section where you can click to learn more. I'll also include the link in the show notes wherever you are listening or watching. All right, let's get back. You mentioned that we can have conversations, so we can outreach to people and ask them to have a conversation with us or just ask them questions. You mentioned the quiz, and you mentioned clicking on different links in emails, all as examples of ways to gather zero-party data. Is there any other ways that you find particularly fruitful when figuring that out for each individual brand that you're working with?
Like I said, there's going to be a lot more tools to help you collect that sort of information, but that's all it really is. It's different ways of engaging with people and having conversations and having those one-to-one touch points that you're having with that other person. And it is a person at the other end. It's not a hit. It's not what did they call it? Sugar. I'm losing it on what Google Analytics calls their people who come to their website. Is it a hit? I don't know. It's not a visitor, though. It's something that it's not just Google. A lot of people use this gross terminology. These are people. These are human beings. Yeah. And you should treat them like it, dang it. And so that zero-party data, though, that most valuable data that you collected and you're in charge of, you're going to have conversations. You're going to have to engage. You're going to have to create those touch points. That's the data, the touch point.
Yes. Data is having conversations.
Yeah.
Just come back to being human. And I love that you're a data person and you're reminding us to be more human and to have more conversations.
Yes.
There's brilliant.
There's nothing more valuable to your own growth, to your own development of being able to provide for people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go full circle. So in building this trust through transparency, you mentioned having privacy policies and just disclosures on the website about how you're handling data. Is there any other way to just create a larger feeling of trust through explaining to people how this is all working?
You said it perfectly. Explain to people how it's all working. When you go into a webinar, tell them ahead of time, listen, hey, I'm going to present to you something that is, a valuable workshop that you can take action on. And at the end, I'm going to give you an option for us to continue working together. Let's start the workshop. What is wrong with saying that as opposed to having the whole rigmarole of, we're going to do 20 minutes of why I'm so great. And then we're going to give 10 minutes of training. And then I'm going to spend another 20 minutes trying to upsell you. there is a nice way of doing things. And it is by telling people what they can expect and what you're going to be taking from them, essentially, and what they can expect to get in return. And that is transparency. And I don't think it's that hard to do when you just kind of step away from the marketing strategies and the way we've always done things, and just think of it like, yeah, a human. It's going to require you to tell people up front, what are you up to?
Yeah, that's fantastic. What are you excited about in your business right now?
I am now this sounds like I'm doing the promo thing, but I'm getting right at the beginning of launching a membership that is sort of, I've thought about it for a gazillion years and a gazillion years online years. So that's like, let's say two in real life years. But I kept getting the feedback from people because I used to have a course, but people would get into it and it's like, this is very overwhelming. And it is overwhelming because it's all the data. And so what I did was I broke it down where it's just, if you can dedicate 15 to 30 minutes a week, you put it in your calendar. That's like week 1, what we do together. And you block off that time period and dedicate that for the next quarter. And we're going to spend the next quarter doing little bite-sized action items that will get you data driven, that will get you in a position to be tracking all of your results. And towards the end of the quarter, then we can look at your results and see what you need to optimize so that we can sort of assess, okay, well, these are the areas that I have to fix. And so having those little bite-sized chunks, you can roll through them if you want, because it's not going to be dripped content or anything. You can just go through each of the weeks. But the idea of making getting data-driven just a little micro commitment. I need 15 to 30 minutes from you. You need 15 to 30 minutes from yourself to be able to get there. And it doesn't have to be this huge, overwhelming thing, because here's the truth of it. You want to make it a habit. It's way more important for you to check in 15, 20 minutes once a week into your numbers than to be like, all right, well, it's December 30th and I'm doing my yearly planning. Actually, people do it in November now. It was like, I'm doing my yearly planning in November. And it's just like, all right, but like looking at your numbers once a year isn't really the way to go. So creating that habit is what I get into. And I've got all the different types of ways that you would track something. So what assets do you need to track for offers? And then for promotions, it's like, where do you put the tracking codes? What do you want to track and why do you want to track it? And then how to look at your reports in a way where it's like, oh yeah, that's where the insights are. So to make it crystal clear to people how you can make sense of your numbers and how to collect them in a nice, intentional, actionable way.
I love that. Such a fantastic format too. Because we need to like build up that muscle. If we haven't been including data driven decisions into our week to week life, it's going to take some baby steps to get us there. And that sounds absolutely brilliant. And I'm really excited for that to come out. Amazing. Yay.
I'm so excited too. And in the transparency vibe, I think that data, like you said, even when you're starting out, it should be something that feels accessible, but you still have to be intentional about it. So I made sure that I kept the price point very low. It's like a $19 membership, a $19 a month membership, and you get out anytime. There's none of these things where it's like, you've committed to this and you're sticking with this forever. No, if you're not getting value out of it anymore, if you've ran through all the material and you're done, your work here is done. But it was really important to me that it be something that's accessible, because people talk about it a whole lot, being like, I want knowledge to be accessible, but you're putting it at a price point where it's not.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's amazing. Love that. So aside from the membership, the people that listen or just happen to like be in my world tend to be voracious learners. Do you have a book or a podcast or some other educational resource that has significantly changed your life or business?
80/20 Marketing is a book that I've really enjoyed, and I usually go through once a year. I've underlined all the parts that sort of are my standout things. So at least once a year, I'll go through and go through all the parts that I've underlined. I love that. I should probably like post something on my Instagram, which I've been delinquent on. But there's such great insights of like how to focus on the big things that are important as opposed to the little things that are taking like so much time or energy, or that deplete you and aren't really getting you the results that you want. So that's one of the books that I've loved intensely. In podcasts, I listen to so many of them. I think, gosh, I wouldn't even know where to start. There's a podcast, Inbox Besties is a podcast by Kate Doster that I listen to. And every month she drops an episode, which is one of my favorite things to listen to every month, because she does the what you should send your list this month. And it always gives me a good idea of an email to send. So it takes the work out of things for me a little bit. And anything that does that for me inspires me enough to just, let's not have to think about this one. I'm a big supporter of. So we're going to go with that as my podcast recommendation.
I love that. I love that. I haven't listened to that one. Now I have a new one to listen to. Thank you. The last thing I need is some other thing to like learn and consume, but that's neither here nor there.
Are you like me, where like somebody will have a preview to another podcast and you're like, oh, this sounds great. And then you add to podcast and you're like, I'm trying to, it's like your wardrobe where you have to get some of them off of the subscribe list so that you actually have room to listen to the others.
Yes. Yes. I do a thing though with podcasts that is really helpful for me. I go through like maybe once a month or once every other month, and I look at my downloaded folder and I delete all of the ones that are not relevant to whatever I'm going through in business. So I only keep the episodes in the downloaded tab of my podcasts that are at least relevant. So like when I decide that I'm going to listen to a podcast, it's really easy for me to like just dip in. However, that said, I will never get through that list. It's still too long. So I'm trying to be discerning.
I need some layovers. Need some.
Yes, there's so much really great content out there, and it's amazing what people do. Next question: if you could implant an idea into everybody's minds that's listening that they would just know from here on out, what would you want everybody to know?
That you know enough to make some really meaningful action and make a really meaningful difference. I think people underestimate what they know, and they think that they need to, reach out for something that they've like, the secret is out there. And if only I can unlock and figure it out, everything will fall into place. And the truth is, you probably know more than enough to get you to where you want to go. You just have to believe in that a little bit more ferociously to get there.
Heck yes. Heck yes. Oh, such a good reminder. And you set up an amazing landing page for people that are listening. Can you tell people about the resources that they can find?
Yeah, I have a book, Results on Repeat. You can get it on Instagram, or you can get it, of course, through the link. And you'll even if you're just curious, by the way, to see how do you set up UTM parameters in a way that's very data driven. So I set up a page because that allows me to, anyone who you drive traffic to that page is not tracked, but the links on that page will direct back to something on my website. So all of those links are tracked links that will say, hey, Kay sent you. And so I'll be able to see that you were a friend of Kay, and that's how you found my website. And so I have links to ROI calculator, which is where you just punch in your numbers, like let's say your sales page. This is how many people come to my website. This is how many people come to my sales page. And this is how many people bought. Where's the optimization opportunity? Where should I be investing my effort? Should I be investing in getting more people to my website, or should I be improving my sales page? Just based on those numbers to see where that low-lying fruit is. Sometimes it feels intimidating to be like, okay, the numbers, now what? To get them to see them in action, being able, like, what can I actually afford to spend on ads? Well, I don't know. How much are you making? So having those calculators do all the work for you is something that that I'm very proud of. And that's available on there. I have my book. I have some videos showing you stuff like, what maybe the problem is with Google Analytics and what you have to look out for if you are going to use it on your site, what your other options are, all kinds of fun resources like that.
Amazing. Amazing. And that's at omgrowth.com/K, right? Is that
It's
the URL?
live dot OMGrowth, OMGrowth.com/K.
Perfect. And we will link to it in the show notes, but I know that not everybody goes to the show notes. So I want to make sure that we put it in their ear as well. So amazing. This was incredible. So eye-opening, such an amazing perspective shift. Thank you for educating me and everybody that is watching or listening. You're just incredible. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. Like I said, I love your brand. And I think it is a great example of what you can do to serve people while you get clear about who they are. Because like that's what your whole brand is, right? Dedicated to
Yeah.
who people actually are. And the fact that you're able to build on that is just, it's an example for the rest of us.
Thank you. All right. Is your mind blown as much as mine was? Let me know. I would love if you reached out and said hello to both Lanie and myself on social media. We're both on Instagram. To find Lanie, you can go to the link in the show notes. You can find the show notes at kputnam.com/podcast. Find her episode there with her special landing page for listeners of the Brand Gravity Show. And then I'm at kputnam on Instagram. If you haven't yet taken that quiz that Lanie and I were mentioning, head over to kputnam.com. Right on the homepage, there is a link and it helps you identify what your brand's innate advantage is. And after you take the quiz, you get some valuable resources and tools that you can use to attract more of your ideal clients to your brand using your innate strengths and personality. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to everybody who has left those 5-star reviews. I read everyone and am so appreciative of all of you that are listening, downloading, subscribing, and reviewing. Helps the show grow and reach more smart entrepreneurs like you.